The morning sun cast long shadows through the windows of Clarence's house as Tom Parker Bowles adjusted his tie in the mirror. His mother, Camilla, had been queen consort for over a year now, and he believed it was time for certain changes. The breakfast table was set with fine china, but the atmosphere was anything but peaceful. Tom had been thinking about this conversation for months. His mother sat across from him, sipping her tea quietly, while his sister Laura chatted about her children's school activities. But Tom's mind was elsewhere. He had watched from the sidelines as his mother navigated her new role, and he felt that their family deserved more recognition within the royal framework. "Mother," Tom began, setting down his coffee cup with deliberate care. "I've been thinking about our family's position." Camilla looked up, her expression neutral but attentive. She had learned to read the subtle shifts in her son's moods over the years. The conversation that followed was careful but pointed. Tom expressed his belief that as the queen consort's children, he and Laura should have more prominent roles in royal events. He mentioned the various charities he supported, the public appearances he made, and how these could be elevated to official royal patronages. His voice grew more confident as he spoke, outlining a vision where the Parker Bowles name would stand alongside the Windsor legacy. Camilla listened patiently, occasionally nodding but saying little. She understood her son's ambitions, but she also knew the delicate balance she had to maintain within the royal family. Years of public scrutiny had taught her the value of patience and discretion. When Tom finished speaking, she simply said, "I'll think about it, darling." But Tom wasn't satisfied with such a vague response. Over the following weeks, he became more persistent. He would bring up the topic during family dinners, send carefully worded emails outlining his proposals, and even enlisted Laura's support, though she was more hesitant about rocking the boat. The palace staff began to notice the tension. Whispers circulated among the household about Tom's increasing visits to Clarence's house and the lengthy private conversations between mother and son. Some sympathized with his position, understanding that being in the shadow of the royal family while your mother held such a prominent position must be challenging. Others felt he was overstepping boundaries that had been carefully established over the years. Meanwhile, at Kensington Palace, Prince William was dealing with his own set of challenges. The Prince of Wales had been working tirelessly on his environmental initiatives and preparing for his future role as king. Reports of Tom's proposals had reached him through the intricate network of palace communications, and he found himself increasingly concerned. William had always maintained a cordial relationship with Camilla. He respected her dedication to his father and her commitment to her royal duties. However, the idea of expanding formal royal roles to include her children from her previous marriage struck him as problematic. The monarchy had undergone significant modernization in recent years, but there were still lines that needed to be carefully maintained. During a routine meeting with his private secretary, William brought up the subject. "What's your take on the Parker Bowles situation?" he asked, his tone measured but clearly interested. His secretary, a veteran of palace politics, chose his words carefully. "It's a delicate matter, sir. Tom Parker Bowles has been quite vocal in private circles about wanting a more formal recognition of his status. He's suggested everything from official titles to funded offices for charitable work." William's jaw tightened slightly. He remembered the years of turmoil the royal family had endured, the careful work that had been done to restore public trust and modernize the institution. Adding new members to the working royal roster, especially those without direct blood ties to the crown, could complicate matters significantly. The situation became more complex when Tom decided to take a bolder approach. He arranged a meeting with King Charles III himself, bypassing the usual protocols. The meeting was ostensibly about a charity event Tom was organizing, but those close to the situation knew there was more on the agenda. Charles, caught between his love for his wife and his duty to the crown, found himself in an uncomfortable position. He listened to Tom's proposals with the patience of a man who had spent his entire life navigating family complexities. Tom spoke passionately about his desire to serve, to use his position for good, to support his mother in her role. "I'm not asking for a title, sir," Tom said, though everyone in the room suspected that wasn't entirely true. "I simply want to be able to contribute more formally to the work my mother is doing. We could be an asset to the crown." Charles nodded thoughtfully, making non-committal sounds of consideration. He promised to discuss the matter with his advisors, but, privately, he knew this was a potential minefield. The British public had finally accepted Camilla as queen consort, but extending that acceptance to her children was another matter entirely. As news of these discussions leaked into wider palace circles, tensions began to rise. William found himself at the center of a growing storm. As the heir to the throne, his opinion carried significant weight, and many looked to him for leadership on this issue. During a family gathering at Windsor Castle, the undercurrents of tension were palpable. Tom and Laura were present, as were William and Catherine. The dinner conversation was polite but strained, with everyone careful to avoid the elephant in the room. But Tom, emboldened by what he perceived as momentum in his favor, couldn't resist making subtle comments about the future of the monarchy and the importance of inclusive leadership. William maintained his composure throughout dinner, but those who knew him well could see the signs of his growing frustration. Catherine placed a gentle hand on his arm at one point, a silent reminder to remain calm. The evening ended without incident, but the battle lines were being drawn. In the days that followed, Tom's campaign became more public. While he didn't speak directly to the media, his friends began appearing in society columns, dropping hints about the evolving nature of the modern monarchy and the valuable contributions that could be made by extending the royal family's reach. This media strategy was a miscalculation. William had spent years learning how to manage public perception, and he recognized a coordinated campaign when he saw one. He convened a meeting with his senior advisors to discuss how to respond to what he now viewed as a direct challenge to the established order. The palace machinery began to move with quiet efficiency. Briefings were prepared outlining the constitutional implications of expanding the working royal family. Historical precedents were researched, showing how previous monarchs had handled similar situations. The message was clear: the monarchy survived by adapting carefully, not by making hasty decisions based on personal ambitions. Camilla found herself in an increasingly difficult position. She loved her children and understood their desire for recognition, but she also grasped the realities of her position. In private conversations with Charles, she tried to find a middle ground, suggesting perhaps unofficial roles that would allow Tom and Laura to support her work without formal recognition. But Tom was no longer satisfied with half measures. He had tasted the possibility of something more, and he was determined to pursue it. He began reaching out to other members of the extended royal family, trying to build support for his position. Some were sympathetic, remembering their own struggles with finding meaningful roles within the royal structure. Others were wary, recognizing the potential for disruption. The situation reached a critical point when Tom made a strategic error. During a charity gala, he was overheard making disparaging remarks about the outdated nature of royal succession and the need for fresh blood in the institution. While he didn't mention William by name, the implication was clear to everyone present. Word of these comments reached William within hours. His reaction was swift and decisive. He scheduled a formal meeting with his father, requesting that Camilla also be present. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the future structure of the royal family. As Tom prepared for what he believed would be his moment of triumph, he had no idea that William had been carefully preparing a response that would not only rebuff his ambitions but would set clear boundaries for years to come. The palace, which had weathered so many storms over the centuries, was about to witness another defining moment in its long history. The oak-paneled conference room at Buckingham Palace had witnessed countless historic meetings, but the tension in the air this particular morning was palpable. William arrived early, his aide carrying a leather folder filled with carefully prepared documents. He stood by the window, looking out at the palace gardens, his posture rigid with determination. Charles entered next, followed closely by Camilla. The king's expression was carefully neutral, but those who knew him well could detect the weariness in his eyes. This was not a conversation he had wanted to have, but William's formal request for a meeting had made it unavoidable. "William," Charles greeted his son with a nod. The Prince of Wales turned from the window, his face set in professional lines. The informal warmth that usually characterized their family interactions was notably absent. "Your Majesty," William replied formally, causing Camilla to shift uncomfortably in her seat. The use of titles rather than familial names set the tone for what was to come. As they settled around the conference table, William's private secretary entered, followed by the king's principal advisor. This was clearly not going to be a casual family discussion. Camilla's heart sank as she realized the full implications of what was about to unfold. William opened the leather folder and began to speak with the measured tone of someone who had rehearsed every word. "I've asked for this meeting to discuss the recent proposals regarding expanding the working royal family to include members who are not in the direct line of succession." He didn't mention Tom by name, but everyone in the room knew exactly who he was referring to. William continued, outlining his concerns with surgical precision. He spoke of constitutional precedents, public perception, and the careful balance that had been struck in modernizing the monarchy while maintaining its essential character. "The strength of our institution," William said, his voice gaining power, "lies in its clarity of purpose and structure. We have worked hard to streamline the monarchy, to make it relevant and sustainable for future generations. Expanding the circle of working royals, particularly to those without direct hereditary claims, would undermine these efforts." Camilla wanted to interject, to explain that Tom's intentions were good, that he only wanted to help. But the formality of the setting and William's commanding presence made it clear that this was not a discussion but a presentation of facts. William pulled out a document from his folder. "I've had our constitutional experts prepare this analysis," he said, sliding copies across the table. "It outlines why extending formal royal roles beyond the current structure would require parliamentary approval and could potentially trigger a constitutional crisis." The document was thorough, citing examples from European monarchies that had faced similar dilemmas. It highlighted how the Spanish and Dutch royal families had dealt with questions of who could represent the crown officially, and the problems that had arisen when those boundaries were blurred. Charles studied the document, his years of preparation for kingship allowing him to quickly grasp the implications. He had known this day would come eventually. The delicate balance he had tried to maintain between his personal life and his public duty was being tested in a way he had hoped to avoid. Furthermore, William continued, "I've been informed of certain public statements made at the Goldsmith Charity Gala last week." He pulled out another paper, a transcript of Tom's overheard comments. "These remarks about outdated succession and the need for fresh blood are particularly concerning." Camilla's face flushed. She hadn't known about Tom's indiscretion, and reading his words in black and white made them seem even more damaging. She could see how they could be interpreted as a direct challenge to William's future role. "I want to be clear," William said, his blue eyes now fixed on Camilla. "I have great respect for you and the work you do supporting my father. But that respect does not extend to allowing the fundamental structure of our institution to be altered based on personal ambitions." The word ambitions hung in the air like an accusation. Camilla straightened in her chair, finding her voice at last. "William, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. Tom isn't trying to undermine anyone. He simply wants to contribute." "There are many ways to contribute without requiring official status," William responded smoothly. "The monarchy has always been supported by extended family members who work quietly in the background. That is the appropriate role here." Charles finally spoke, his voice carrying the weight of his position. "William, while I understand your concerns, we must also consider the human element here. Tom and Laura are part of our family now." William's response was immediate and unwavering. "With respect, they are your stepchildren, not members of the royal family. The British people have accepted Camilla as queen consort because of her dedication and service. Extending that acceptance to her children, who have no constitutional role, would be a step too far." He pulled out newspaper clippings and public opinion polls. Public sentiment is already mixed on various royal expenditures. Adding more individuals to the public payroll, individuals who have no direct connection to the crown, would be politically untenable. The meeting continued for another hour, with William systematically dismantling every argument for expanding Tom's role. He presented financial projections showing the cost of additional working royals, security assessments highlighting the complexity of protecting extended family members, and diplomatic concerns about precedents and protocol at state events. But it was his final argument that carried the most weight. "If we open this door," William said, looking directly at his father, "where does it end? Do my cousin's children get roles? What about their spouses? We must maintain clear boundaries, or the institution becomes unwieldy and loses its meaning. Charles looked tired, older than his years. He had spent so long fighting for acceptance of his relationship with Camilla, and now his son was drawing a line that would forever limit her children's involvement in royal life. What do you propose? Charles asked quietly. William was prepared for this too. Tom and Laura should continue their private charitable work. They can attend family events as family members, not as representatives of the crown. Any attempts to blur these lines should be firmly discouraged. And, he paused, choosing his words carefully, any further public comments that could be construed as criticism of the monarchy's structure should be addressed immediately. The implications were clear. This was not just a rebuff but a warning. William was prepared to use his influence and future position to ensure that the boundaries he was setting would be maintained. Camilla felt tears prickling at her eyes but refused to let them fall. She thought of Tom, waiting eagerly to hear about new opportunities, and her heart broke a little. But she also understood, perhaps for the first time, the full weight of what William carried as the future king. I need to speak with Tom, she said quietly. William nodded, his expression softening slightly. I think that would be wise. Make it clear that this isn't personal. It's about protecting the institution we all serve. As the meeting concluded and they filed out of the room, Charles lingered, catching William's arm. That was harsh, William. It was necessary, William replied. You've taught me that being king means making difficult decisions. This is one of them. Meanwhile, Tom was lunching at his club, regaling friends with stories of his plans. He spoke confidently about the changing nature of the monarchy, about how his mother's position opened new possibilities. He had no idea that at that very moment, those possibilities were being systematically closed off. Laura, always more perceptive than her brother, had begun to sense that something was shifting. She received a call from her mother asking her to come to Clarence's house immediately. The urgency in Camilla's voice told her everything she needed to know. When Laura arrived, she found her mother in the private sitting room, looking defeated in a way she had rarely seen. What's happened? Laura asked, though she suspected she already knew. Camilla explained the morning's meeting, trying to soften William's words but unable to hide their impact. Laura listened quietly, occasionally nodding. Unlike Tom, she had always been more realistic about their position within the royal framework. Tom's not going to take this well, Laura said finally. No, Camilla agreed. He won't. They discussed how to break the news to Tom, how to make him understand that this wasn't a rejection of him personally but a protection of the institution. But they both knew that Tom would see it as exactly that, a rejection, a closing of doors he had convinced himself were opening. As evening approached, Tom received a call from his mother asking him to come to Clarence's house. He arrived in high spirits, expecting good news. The sight of his mother and sister's somber faces immediately dampened his enthusiasm. The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult of Camilla's life. She watched her son's face transform from expectation to confusion to anger as she explained William's position. Tom's reaction was explosive. This is William's doing, he said, pacing the room like a caged animal. He's always resented us. This is his way of keeping us in our place. That's not true, Tom, Camilla said firmly. William is protecting the monarchy. It's his duty. His duty? Tom's voice was bitter. What about family? What about supporting each other? Laura tried to interject, to help her brother see reason, but Tom was beyond listening. Years of feeling like an outsider, of watching his mother navigate the complexities of royal life while he remained on the periphery, all came pouring out. I've supported you, he said to his mother, his voice breaking slightly. Through everything. The public scrutiny, the criticism, the endless protocols. And this is what I get in return. To be told I'm not good enough to officially represent the family I've been part of for years? Camilla reached out to her son, but he pulled away. Tom, please understand. This isn't about being good enough.
It's about maintaining the structure that allows the monarchy to function.
Structure, Tom repeated mockingly. Always about structure and tradition and protocol.
Never about people.
The argument continued late into the evening, with Tom's anger giving way to hurt and, then, to a cold determination. If William wanted to draw battle lines, then, so be it. He would find other ways to make his mark, to prove his worth. But, even as he made these mental plans, Tom failed to realize that he had already lost. William's rebuff wasn't just a temporary setback but a definitive statement about the future of the monarchy. The young prince who would one day be king had made his position clear, and there would be no changing his mind. As Tom stormed out of Clarence House that night, Camilla stood at the window watching him go. She understood now what the crown truly cost, not just in terms of personal sacrifice but in the barriers it erected even within families. The fairy tale of becoming queen came with a price, and, tonight, watching her son's retreating figure, she felt the full weight of that cost. The weeks following William's decisive meeting rippled through royal circles like a stone thrown into still water. Tom Parker Bowles retreated to his Notting Hill home, nursing his wounded pride and plotting his next move. He had underestimated William, seeing him as merely his mother's stepson rather than the future king who had been trained since birth to protect the institution of monarchy. In his study, surrounded by photographs from happier times, Tom made phone calls to journalists he had cultivated over the years. He was careful, never speaking on the record, but the message he wanted to convey was clear: the royal family was more divided than it appeared, and certain members were being unfairly excluded despite their willingness to serve. These whispered conversations soon bore fruit. Articles began appearing in society magazines questioning the modernization of the monarchy. Opinion pieces wondered aloud whether the royal family was becoming too exclusive, too removed from the blended families that made up modern Britain. While Tom's name was never mentioned directly, those within palace circles knew exactly where these stories originated. William monitored these developments from Kensington Palace with growing concern. His communications team brought him daily briefings on the media coverage, analyzing the subtle shifts in public perception. He recognized Tom's handiwork in the carefully planted stories, the strategic leaks designed to pressure the palace into reconsidering. "He's trying to wage a PR war," Catherine observed one evening, reading through the latest batch of articles. She had maintained a dignified distance from the conflict, but privately supported her husband's position entirely. "Then, he's chosen the wrong battlefield," William replied. He had learned from his mother's experience how to handle media manipulation, and he wasn't about to let Tom's campaign gain momentum. The response came swiftly but subtly. Palace sources began briefing friendly journalists about the important work being done by the streamlined monarchy. Statistics were released showing how the reduced number of working royals had actually increased efficiency and public engagement. The message was clear: the system was working perfectly as it was. More pointedly, stories began emerging about the constitutional role of the monarchy and the importance of maintaining clear lines of succession and representation. Historical examples were cited of monarchies that had failed when they became too diffuse, too unclear about who truly represented the crown. Charles watched this media chess match with dismay. He found himself caught between his son's determination to protect the future of the monarchy and his wife's anguish at seeing her children shut out. During private moments with Camilla, he tried to offer comfort, but both knew that his hands were tied. William's arguments had been constitutionally sound and politically astute. The situation escalated when Tom made another critical error. Frustrated by the palace's counter-narrative, he agreed to give a speech at a charity event, ostensibly about food writing and philanthropy. But, carried away by the moment and, perhaps one too many glasses of wine, he made several pointed comments about tradition holding back progress and the need for new voices in old institutions. The speech was recorded, and clips quickly made their way online. While Tom hadn't mentioned the royal family directly, the subtext was unmistakable. Royal correspondents had a field day analyzing his words, with some defending his right to speak freely and others criticizing him for what they saw as thinly veiled attacks on the monarchy. This was the opening William had been waiting for. He convened an emergency meeting with the palace communications team and senior advisors. The gloves were now off, and it was time to end this challenge to royal authority once and for all. A carefully crafted statement was released from Kensington Palace. It didn't mention Tom by name but spoke eloquently about the importance of unity within the royal family and the need for all members, including extended family, to respect the constitutional framework that governed the monarchy. The statement emphasized that personal ambitions must never supersede the greater good of the institution. But William wasn't content with just a press release. He arranged for a series of high-profile engagements that showcased exactly how the modern monarchy should function. He and Catherine undertook visits to youth centers, environmental projects, and mental health facilities, demonstrating hands-on involvement and genuine connection with the public. During one such visit, a reporter asked William about the recent speculation regarding the royal family structure. His response was measured but pointed. The monarchy serves the people through clarity of purpose and dedication to duty.
We are focused on the work, not on titles or positions.
That has always been our way, and it will continue to be so. The message resonated with the public. Opinion polls showed strong support for maintaining the current structure of the working royal family. The British people, it seemed, valued stability and tradition over the kind of changes Tom had been advocating for. Laura watched her brother's campaign crumble with a mixture of sympathy and frustration. She had tried repeatedly to counsel him against this course of action, but Tom's pride had made him deaf to reason. Now, as his media allies began distancing themselves and invitations to society events dried up, she saw the real cost of challenging the future king. "You need to stop this," Laura told her brother during a tense meeting at his home.
"You're not just fighting William now.
You're fighting the entire institution, and you cannot win." Tom sat slumped in his chair, the fight seemingly drained out of him. The past weeks had taken their toll. His business ventures had suffered as partners worried about being associated with someone who appeared to be at odds with the royal family.
Friends had become distant, unsure of where loyalty should lie. "What am I supposed to do?" he asked his sister. "Just accept being pushed aside? Accept that we'll always be outsiders?"
"We were always outsiders, Tom," Laura said gently.
"That hasn't changed."
"What's changed is your inability to accept it." The final blow came when Charles, under pressure from William and his advisors, made a public appearance where he spoke about the importance of the monarchy's constitutional role. Without mentioning the recent controversy, he made it clear that the structure of the working royal family was not up for debate or change.
"The monarchy endures because it respects its limitations," Charles said.
"We serve within a framework that has evolved over centuries.
Personal desires must always yield to institutional necessity."
For Tom, hearing these words from his stepfather was devastating. The man who had once seemed like an ally, who had brought his mother into the heart of the royal family, was now closing ranks with William. The message couldn't have been clearer: the matter was settled, and Tom had lost. Camilla, torn between loyalty to her son and her duty as queen consort, made one last attempt at reconciliation. She arranged a private meeting between Tom and William, hoping that away from advisors and protocol, they might find common ground. The meeting took place at Highgrove, Charles's beloved country estate. The setting was informal, but the tension was palpable as the two men faced each other across the drawing room.
Camilla made introductions and, then, withdrew, leaving them to talk.
"I want you to understand," William began, "this was never personal."
Tom laughed bitterly. "Everything about this has been personal."
"You've made sure of that." William's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure.
"No, Tom.
You made it personal when you tried to leverage your mother's position for your own advancement. The monarchy isn't a family business where relatives get positions based on connections." "I wanted to serve," Tom protested.
"I wanted to contribute something meaningful."
"Then, do it," William said simply.
"Continue your charitable work.
Write your books. Live your life. But do it as Tom Parker Bowles, not as some quasi-royal figure. That's not who you are, and pretending otherwise serves no one." The conversation continued for another hour, with both men airing grievances and defending their positions.
But, gradually, something shifted.
Tom began to see, perhaps for the first time, the enormous burden William carried. The future king wasn't just protecting his own position but safeguarding an institution that belonged to the nation.
You really believe this, don't you? Tom said finally. That keeping us out is for the greater good?
I do, William replied without hesitation. The monarchy survives by being clear about what it is and what it isn't. Blurring those lines weakens us all. As the meeting concluded, there was no warm reconciliation, no sudden understanding that erased all the hurt and anger. But there was, perhaps, a grudging respect. Tom saw William not as the stepbrother who had rejected him but as the future king who had made a difficult but necessary decision. In the months that followed, Tom gradually withdrew from his public campaign. The articles stopped, the whispered conversations with journalists ceased. He returned to his food writing and occasional charitable appearances, careful now to maintain a clear separation from royal activities. Camilla watched her son find his way back to a quieter life with relief and sadness. The dream of her children being fully integrated into royal life had died, but perhaps that had always been an impossible dream. She had gained a crown but at the cost of seeing barriers erected around her children that would never fully come down. William, for his part, considered the matter closed. He had established his authority and protected the institution he would one day lead. But, late at night, in quiet moments with Catherine, he sometimes wondered about the human cost of such decisions. Being king, he was learning, meant making choices that prioritized the crown over personal relationships. The palace returned to its normal rhythms, the crisis averted, the challenge defeated. But the scars remained. Family gatherings were now carefully choreographed affairs where everyone knew their place and stayed within prescribed boundaries. Tom and Laura attended as family members, nothing more, their dreams of greater involvement buried beneath protocols and constitutional precedents. Years later, historians would look back on this episode as a defining moment in William's preparation for kingship. It was when he proved that he could make hard decisions, when he showed that protecting the monarchy meant sometimes saying no to family. It was, in many ways, his first real test as a future king, and he had passed it decisively. But, for those who lived through it, it was remembered differently. For Camilla, it was when she truly understood the price of the crown she wore. For Tom, it was the end of an illusion and the beginning of acceptance. And, for William, it was the moment he realized that being king meant sometimes standing alone, even against those who claimed to want to help. The British monarchy, that ancient institution that had survived civil wars and constitutional crises, had weathered another storm. It emerged unchanged, perhaps even strengthened, but the human cost of that survival would echo through family relationships for years to come. The palace walls stood firm, but within them, the distances between family members had grown larger, the price of preserving an institution measured in broken dreams and unspoken resentments. As Tom Parker Bowles returned to his life outside the palace gates, he carried with him the knowledge that some doors, once closed, could never be reopened. The monarchy would continue, as it always had, but he would watch from the outside, forever marked by his failed attempt to join its inner circle. William's rebuff had been absolute, a stunning demonstration of royal authority that would define the boundaries between the crown and those who orbited it for generations to come.